Welcome everybody to the meeting. Can you hear me now? And welcome to those on Channel 16 live with a few second delay anyway, at home. We have a full agenda today, so I would first move or ask somebody to take a look at the minutes and see if we can move their approval from last meeting, the September 18th meeting.
So move, Anderson.
Can I have a second?
Second.
Are there any additions or corrections? If not, I would, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Discussions today are, we have three discussion items. We'll start with number A. Letter A, vicious dog ordinance discussion, and we have Keith Adelstein here from our legal department. And Keith, if you could come forward, we would appreciate it. We have two ordinances here, and I would ask you to give us a brief discussion or brief outline of the differences in these two.
Keith Adelstein, City Attorney's Office. The two proposals that you have before you, one's labeled 1300, other one 1301. The main difference between the two, I guess really the only difference between the two, is in section 7-3. In the one labeled 1300, if you'll notice under subsection A, it breaks down into, as 4 subcategories under subsection A. What those do is the first one defines when an animal can be declared vicious on public property. The second subsection defines when an animal can be declared vicious on private property belonging to the dog owner or the animal owner. The third one then defines when an animal can be declared vicious on any other private property. In the other proposal, rather than breaking those down into 3 different subsections, we just have a one subsection to cover all those, and that's subsection 1 that talks about when an animal can be declared vicious on any public or private property. So it wouldn't matter whether it's the property of the dog owner or animal owner, if it's other private property, or if it's a public sidewalk or park. I think same standard would apply under all those circumstances. Other than that, the proposals are exactly the same. If you want me to talk about the other changes, I will, but that's the distinction between the two.
Okay.
Our recommendation would be for the proposal 1301, which is the more simplified version, and just applying one standard no matter where the animal bite occurs or the attack occurs. The same standard would apply whether it's public or private property.
Discussion. Yes.
Yeah, I
Councilor
move that we accept 1301 and move it to the City Council.
Do I hear a second?
I'll second that.
Any other discussion? Yes, Councilor Anderson.
I feel that the changes in here puts the emphasis on the animal owner and basically tells the animal owner that they have responsibilities for owning any type of animal inside the City of Sioux Falls. So I will be supporting this as we move forward.
Okay. Any other discussion? Yes.
And I guess just as importantly that it puts the animal owner on notice that if their animal does inflict any injury upon anybody, that it's their job to notify the city that it was their animal, and to also gives them the puts the burden of helping to render aid on that person also, instead of just walking away from any sort of animal attack. So I will support it also.
Thank you. I noticed the difference here. One other difference is the 5 to 15 days on subsection B. Is there a reason for extending that from 5 to 15?
That's the same in both proposals.
Yep.
It's a change from the present. Basically, the reason for that is to reflect the same. A person now has 15 days to file an administrative appeal. So if your dog is involved or animal is involved in some sort of an attack, the city declares it vicious through the administrative appeal process, you can appeal that. You have 15 days to do that. So it didn't seem to make a lot of sense to say you have 5 days to comply with these vicious dog requirements while you're another 10 days to appeal the decision, and you may not have to. So it should stay that. So it gives them the same amount of time to either come into compliance or file their administrative appeal.
Okay, thank you. Anything else? We have a motion to accept the ordinance that we have numbered 1301. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, Keith, very much. Okay. Get rid of that one so I keep the right one. Next on the agenda is information from Mr. Cooper, Mike Cooper, on public hearing notification update. Mike.
Yes, good afternoon. I'm Mike Cooper, Planning and Building Services. Just wanted to give you a quick update. I know we've talked about this before with you, but in 2011, there was a movement to get a better process for public notification of items that would be going to the Planning Commission and/or City Council. In addition to the posting of the signs, we talked about an actual letter that would go out to surrounding neighborhoods, property owners. And that was made a part of the zoning ordinance in 2011. So since about July of 2011, we have been using that process that the planning staff will put together a letter and that will go out to all property owners within 300 feet of a rezoning or a conditional use or whatever the action item might be. And that's in addition to the posting of the signs and in addition to the legal notice that goes into the newspaper. And we think that that process has worked out really, really well. I know there was a lot of debate about, you know, how far out do you notify and how many days and is it certified letter or regular mail? But it's a 10-day notice. And just to kind of give you an overview, and I can put this in the form of an email if you'd like, but since July of 2011 and going forward over the last 12-month period, we have used this procedure for 120 different items, and that has involved mailing out 2,721 notices, which averages to about 22 notices per item. And then we also looked at the amount of staff time that's involved with doing the letters and the mailings, and then if people call, and that's another good thing about the process is that it has initiated a lot more calls from the public asking about information, and that I think in many cases has led people to say, well, now that you've told me what's being proposed, I don't have a concern about it, but I know that I can still either go to the Planning Commission or I can watch it on CityLink. And so it's been a better, I think, process as far as providing public information. But the average amount of hours per month of staff time has been 6.5. So it hasn't been a real burdensome process in terms of staff time or cost of implementing this. So that's a very quick overview. We think it's working well. We're not sure that there's a need to do any further revisions or amendments to the process. So we just wanted to kind of give you an update on that after a little over 1 year of implementing it.
Questions, Kermit or Mr.
Mike, you
Stegers?
mentioned that some people might be watching the Planning Commission now, but have you detected any increase in people coming to the Planning Commission meetings, or?
Yes, I think in many cases there has been, and not, excuse me, and not necessarily to oppose something, but just to make sure that, well, this is what the staff said it was going to be, but let's make sure that that's actually happened. You know, we also have with our Planning Commission meetings a process that has worked pretty well over the years. Like the council, we have a consent agenda. And so at the beginning of the Planning Commission meeting, we will read through all the items on the consent agenda, and we will ask anybody in the audience or any planning commissioner or any petitioner if they would like an item to be moved off the consent agenda. But what we found is that we have more people coming even for those consent agenda items, again, just to kind of make sure that there isn't a change in the process. But so I think in terms of public information, you know, understanding the process, it's really been working very well. And I know that you also had a lot of thoughts about which way it should go.
Anything else? I want to personally thank you, because I know I spent a lot of time talking about it, and you did too. We spent a lot of time talking back and forth on it, and this kind of compromise really seems to have worked that we put together. And if this is what has happened, boy, that's great. It's just fantastic, because we've gotten some people involved. We've gotten more people, more of the public involved in it, and that's exactly what we wanted to happen, so that when things did start heating up, they were aware. They were aware. A couple other questions. Signs. Are these signs? I guess we really didn't do anything with the signs themselves. So we're not finding anything now that we really need to do there, because we are getting out to the people within 300 feet, and we're touching them, and they've got a letter, so the signs aren't getting buried by the snow and all this kind of thing. Even if they are, they've gotten a personal touch with the letter, so no big deal.
I think the letter is probably doing much more benefit than the sign posting, but the sign still does work, and when people are driving by, and I think we've done a better job of working with these petitioners to get a better system of posting the sign in the ground so it doesn't get knocked out.
Don't need that sign that you brought in that one day.
We still have it.
We still have it?
If we ever want to bring it back, yes.
For some of you that weren't here, we had a 10-foot pole on a what? With
It was on a
about
metal
4 by 8,
signpost, yeah.
metal signpost, yeah. It was a pretty good substantial sign. It wouldn't have blown down in the wind in the wintertime. But anyway, that works out pretty good, so
Thank you for
very much.
for the update.
Yes, thank you. Okay, without any further ado, we'll move on to item number C, shaping places, zoning ordinance update. Sam?
Sam Trebilcock, City of Sioux Falls Planning Office. This is just another opportunity. We want to continue coming to the Land Use Committee and eventually, hopefully, to City Council to give updates of where we're at in the process to update the zoning ordinance. So this is the third time we've been here with you guys. So we can get this going. Okay. This is the same slide I showed you guys last time, just I've obviously highlighted in the red where we're at in the process in our public involvement plan. In September and through early October here, we've rolled out that full draft ordinance. It's out on the website now, available for people's review. We've reviewed that with our study group now a couple of times. We just had a meeting yesterday also. We had a little bit of review with your committee here, and then also with the Planning Commission. Now we also then had an open house last week. Again, another opportunity to get out to the public. We had 32 people that did attend that open house last week, which isn't too bad actually for an open house. The main thing that we're trying to do with an open house is trying to generate not just how many people show up, but what is that doing to get the word out to the public? And I've already noticed a lot more awareness from the general public in terms of calls and emails asking for presentations. I'm getting quite a few more of that, and that's one of the things that we're certainly looking for, is getting more information out there to the public in any way that we can. Where we're at now is that we're in the process of looking at, here in October and early November, rolling out the draft zoning map. As I probably mentioned to you before, that's a part of this whole process. We need to start looking at updates to the zoning map so that we make sure that it works with the new text of the zoning ordinance. Otherwise, people aren't going to be able to develop the same way they're able to develop now, or be able to develop some of the new standards that we have. So it's a very important part of the process, and of course it's very personal too, because it has to do with people's property. So we're looking at doing that here fairly soon, and we're going to review that in the same process that we did with the draft zoning ordinance in the text. So you can be looking for that coming up here very soon, and I'll go through a little bit of what our plan is with that zoning map. Again, in November, we'd come back and find out what changes need to be made. We're already getting comments about that, and I'll show you a little bit about what we're hearing, have heard already. And this will be kind of November, early December. Start to find out from the public what we need to tweak or what we need to change to continue moving it forward. And then in December, early January, we'd be looking at the public, the Planning Commission meetings, public hearings, and City Council meetings. Again, that's the plan that we've kind of laid out. Again, what is Shaped Places? This, I always want to bring this up in the back of the room. We have an executive summary board that we had at the open house. We want to keep bringing forward what our goal is in this entire process. And, you know, it hasn't been changed since 1983. We think it's really an important time. We've heard it quite often. It's consistent with our comprehensive plan that we adopted a couple of years ago to update that 1983 ordinance. Goals are more development options, consistent and predictable regulations, new or innovative site planning options, and a more user-friendly format. When can we move forward? I keep bringing this, and I brought this up to the study group yesterday. We had a really good discussion, a lot of good questions, and I think that's where a lot of this is going to come from, is because it's hard to review the entire thing, the entire zoning ordinance. And so people are just wondering, what changes if we do this? What changes, what happens if we do this and develop this? So we had a good discussion on some different scenarios. And that's where we start to determine people's comfort level with it, or the kinds of things that they'd like to see changed. So at this point in time, kind of our goal is, for when we can move forward, is when can we reach a consensus that adequate opportunity for comment has been provided, and that the group believes the process has been fair. And we kind of start with our study group on that. But the same thing goes for, certainly for Land Use Committee and for Planning Commission. We want to hear from everybody about when you think we're ready to move forward based upon that standard. As I mentioned when I talked to the study group yesterday, one of the things that they talked to me about was, you know, do you really think you can stay within this time frame that you had? And I said, well, the reason we did that in part was we're trying to get your attention. We knew that if you don't set a goal and a timeline, people aren't going to notice it. They're going to say, okay, it could happen, you know, in 2 years, 3 years, so they don't really take a look at it. So we want them to take a look at, you know, and they've been doing that. They've been looking into the ordinance. There's a lot of good questions. I had a conversation with the developer for a half an hour on the phone today. He was just asking questions. And obviously he had been looking at it. And I was like, boy, you really have looked at this. This is great. And that's what we're looking for here. Does it mean that we're necessarily going to stay exactly within that time frame? No, we're going to look at this goal right here when everybody feels there's been adequate opportunity for comment and you believe the process has been fair. We hope then we can move it forward. I do want to go through, and we, like I mentioned, we went through a number of different scenarios, but I think this is one scenario that we talked quite a bit about that can affect a fair number of people in residential areas, and this is just how it would affect under the current ordinance versus how it would be under the proposed ordinance. In this case, and this comes from a Planning Commission agenda item maybe a few months ago. In this case, it's a residential scenario, a conditional use permit in an RD zone. RD would allow right now twin homes and townhomes and single family. In this case, they're doing a 4-unit residential building on a local street. Currently, it's allowed as a conditional use with the following standard. Here's what the standard states. Dwellings shall be located in areas where they are compatible with adjacent uses with regard to traffic, size, density, and other significant factors. That's currently. Really, this creates some confusion, and when it might come to you in some cases, if it's appealed, people are going, what is the standard? Is it compatible in that district or not? That's what we want to know. And essentially what this standard is stating is if it's in the district, it probably should be compatible. So what we're proposing is that we're going to look at anything that this proposed permitted would be a permitted use in a different district called RD2, and any townhome would be a permitted use. It wouldn't be conditional. So within the RD2, you would also have single family and twin homes. So if you were developing in that area or you were planning to live in that area, you would know right away that that is what's available in that area. If you wanted to only live where there's single family homes, you would look at an RS district. RS districts now also allow as a conditional use twin homes, but that's going to be moved to just RD. So there's basically what you're looking at is what are you expecting in that area? And what we're finding is this is really the only area where we're trying to make sure that everybody knows what's expected. And the developers, I think, that way know what they're to expect when they're coming into it. Right now, they're saying, okay, it's conditional, so I can do it, right? Well, it kind of depends on probably how many people are in the room that night. Really. And we want to move that forward to, again, more predictable standards. And that was one of our goals. So that's just kind of one scenario we kind of throw out there, and certainly can take your questions on that after I get through here. So what are we hearing so far? As I mentioned, we had an open house last week that 32 people had attended. Based on that and getting the information out there, some things in the media so far too. We're having more presentation requests because of that, which is exactly what we're looking for. So if anybody knows of anybody that would like a presentation, whether it be on the entire ordinance or certain aspects of it, we're planning office would love to do that. So far, generally, we've had really positive remarks, although sometimes they don't know what question to ask. And so we're trying to get the information out there as best we can so that we can start generating those questions. What we had in the study group yesterday, there was a lot of good questions once they start understanding a little bit what we're trying to do, what our goals are. Some of the things that are kind of outstanding to them and some good questions that they had, I've heard this a few times, is how is this transition period going to work, going from the old ordinance to the new one? And that's things that we'll continue to look at and work on. That's certainly, as you move from any old big comprehensive ordinance to another one, we know that's issues that you have to continue to work with people on. Another thing that came up that was really good in our study group meeting is to allow for a year review period with recommendations for needed changes. So what we would do, as we found in other cities, when they do a comprehensive change, there's always something that doesn't work exactly like you intended. We're vetting it as best we can, but we know that as you implement it, that there might be some things you want to come back and revisit. So what we're going to do is that study group would continue to come back. We would get comments from them and then decide how we could maybe tweak it after about a year. And then we hear a lot from people, when will that zoning map be available? There's a lot of interest in finding out how we've been looking at that, what changes there's going to be out there. And we would certainly understand that to be very natural. So, and what we're looking at is for that to be available. I think I have that in the next slide. It'll be available on November 1st is what our target is to get the information out there. It's going to be available through the City of Sioux Falls website. That's something that I was showing a little bit to the study group yesterday, how you would kind of doing a little beta testing with it yesterday at the end of the meeting. It will allow you to search by address. We'll have it at an open house by mid-November. So that'd be another opportunity for people to get the information about that. We take comments about the zoning map by email at the open house, by phone call, presentations that people want us to give, we'll take them there. Really our goals with the zoning map, we're not changing anything, up zoning or down zoning people. We're not changing their ability to develop or reducing it. I think that's the main concern. So goal 1 is to allow all property to operate at the same land use level that it does now. In some cases, that means a zoning change because we've changed maybe the name of the zoning district or we've changed where that use is fitting. Like I mentioned with RD2 and townhomes, if there's a number of townhomes that have been built already or there's plans for others, we want to make sure that fits in RD2 zone so that we're not creating non-conforming uses. And then goal 2 is to reduce the number of non-conforming uses we have out there right now. I think I maybe even mentioned that in the last meeting I was here. There are quite a few uses out there that the use is not within the district that they're listed on the zoning map. So they're considered a non-conforming use. So if they try to do some improvements or changes or expansions, they run into trouble. So we're going to try to rectify many of those issues, and especially in the core area of the city, we see quite a bit of that. So that's another goal that we have. With that, I would take any questions you have, and I can certainly go back to certain other sections. Another thing I would mention is on the back there too, another board that we have is, and you can't really see it, but I can pull it up too, is what each of the districts, the uses and forms that are allowed within each one of those districts. And I think that's something that's up on our website. It's available. If you're interested in certain forms that we have available or certain uses under those zoning districts, we can certainly go through those too.
Thank you, Sam. Very, very good. I noticed people writing things down, so Councilor Staggers, you probably have a few questions.
Yeah. Sam, with this new zoning map, I would suspect there's probably going to be some people that just do not like where their property is zoned differently.
You mean?
Yes.
That what we rezone it to, that they won't like it, you mean?
Yeah, they might not like it.
Yeah, I think that's part of the dialogue that we'd have. Again, our goal is to, and the intent is not to change their development level. But I suppose there's going to be interpretations on exactly what that means.
Mm-hmm. So what are we going to do about people that, are zoned a certain way right now, and then we have the new zoning map, and they don't like where they're at in the new zoning map? Are we going to allow some kind of exceptions or?
Well, I mean, that's part of the public comment period that we'll have, and they're going to make their case. Everybody would. Now, when you look at the zoning map, when it is available, it's about half the city, although a lot of it is really pretty minor changes. Mm-hmm. I'll give you an example. A big part of the city that's zoned right now RC, we've split our RC districts into recreation district and a conservation district, so that's the change. That's what I'd consider pretty minor. Another thing that we changed that you'll see, anybody that is in an RS1 district, that's actually going to be merged into the RS2 district and just going to be called RS. So really the only changes there are if you have an RS1, it's a 30-foot setback, and now it goes down to 25. So actually it gives them more of a development option in RS1, and their side yards go from 7 to 5. So again, they have more. It's not as much as the city as you end up really seeing, but certainly there is going to be questions like that, and that's just the dialogue that we want to create through the public involvement process. So we will respond to each one of them.
Also, too, if I can mention that when it comes to the signage, there's a lot of people that have expressed concerns about the signage issue. With the miscellaneous signs, are we going to be a little more flexible on, miscellaneous signs, or come up with some new categories or something?
Well, that continues to be something that's worked on through a signage committee. We had 4 different committees that were working on that. You know, to what degree they continue to look on that, I don't know. That's something that Jeff's been working on, so I'm going to let him answer that a little bit. So.
Hi, Jeff Schmidt from City Planning. The quick answer is yes.
Okay.
If there's specific concerns, they can bring them to you, and they can bring them forward to me, but absolutely, we've addressed every issue and concern that they've brought forward so far.
So in other words, can we anticipate that nonprofit organizations might be able to put up signs for a few weeks or whatever?
To answer that specific question, no, because we don't pick and choose who gets to put up signs. If someone wants to put up a sign, someone can put up a sign, but we don't get to say nonprofits can, but schools can't, or a school can, but a person can. Yes, you can put up signs. So we don't pick and choose who gets to put up signs.
I guess I'm not, you know, because there's been a lot of news stories about the Catholic schools.
Right,
you know,
but again, we don't pick and, you don't get to say Catholic schools can, but Lutheran schools can't. It's a sign can be put up. You don't choose who gets to put up signs.
For a specific amount of
Correct.
time.
Thank you.
My understanding was that miscellaneous signs would include, you know, the Catholic schools, and they can't do it or something.
But we don't pick and choose Catholic schools versus Lutheran. It's a sign can be put up or a sign can't be put up. We don't pick and choose
okay.
a school versus a YMCA versus a garage sale.
Right. But in reality, we do pick sides because we allow politicians to put signs up. But when it comes to schools or Boy Scouts or something like that, we don't allow it.
That's incorrect.
Chair?
I've had a number of people tell me that.
Councilor Staggers, the way I've seen this, and Public Services have been looking at signs for over a year, working with Jeff on this. It's the type of signs that are being put up, and the type of signs have a limited expiration date. There's just a period of time that you can have that sign up. It doesn't matter whether you're a nonprofit, a school, a business, or anybody. If you're putting up a sign like a political sign, those signs can only be up during a certain time period.
Goes back to time, place, and manner by federal law and state law. So it's time, place, and manner, not whose sign it is. So we've addressed that issue. That's why I said quickly, yes, we've addressed it, and it's in the law.
Okay, so the Catholic schools cannot put signs up.
That's not correct.
That's not correct.
Okay, because
Let me
if you could
see if I
clarify
can
that,
do
really.
this.
Yeah.
If you think of those signs, think of those signs as the same as your campaign signs. Those could only be up certain times before your election, and they had to be down at a certain time after your election. Those were the same shape, kind of signs, so they could only be up for a certain amount of time.
Okay,
Correct?
so
Am I
what's-
right on that, Jeff? So now, if they wanted to put a different kind of sign up in a different location, a commercial location, they could be up for a lot longer time. But because they were in your yard and they were certain shape, certain type, they could only be up for a certain amount of time.
Okay, so what are the rules for the Catholic signs?
Not Catholic, for that type of sign,
Okay, what's the rules for that type of sign?
that's better. There you go.
What's the rule?
Okay, correct.
What's the rule?
Right. Currently, the current law is that we do not allow miscellaneous signs in the yards,
Okay.
or in the public right-of-way. Political signs are allowed in those locations.
Yes, so we have chosen political above the miscellaneous.
Correct.
Yes,
At
we've
this-
chosen that.
In the current law, but what you asked about was what's the proposal, and the proposal addresses both of those. Miscellaneous signs can be allowed in the front yards, and miscellaneous signs will be allowed in the boulevards.
Okay, this is proposed.
Correct, sir.
Okay, that's basically what I wanted to know.
Right,
Yeah.
but we don't,
Not now.
correct, but we don't stipulate whose signs they are.
No, I started off with miscellaneous.
Okay.
And, yeah.
Is there a time limit on that too then, Jeff?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Any other questions? Counselor Anderson?
So much a question, but excuse me, Sam, you've done a great job with this. One other thing, a suggestion could be maybe getting yourself or this agenda item on the mayor's listening sessions so that you're moving around the city and being able to make those presentations during those also.
Sure.
Just another way to get out to the people.
Yeah, I mean, we're looking for any way to get out there, so we'd love to be able to do that, and it's a good suggestion, yeah.
Other questions from the committee members? Yes, Councilor Sagers.
Sam, is there any provision in the new zoning ordinance to allow residential homes to be in industrial areas? If they want to, of
It's
course.
interesting you brought up something like that. It's kind of a live-work type of a facility. A couple of the comments I've received is from people already. What we have in the ordinance, first let me go back, what we have in the ordinance that updated is that we allow in a very specific district, what we call live-work, to allow apartments or an office to be located within the same district. Right now it's just apartments or it's just offices. But what also came up is people were interested a little bit in saying, hey, what if I have a business and we'd like to have a unit? It's kind of like flipping a home occupation on end, doing exactly the opposite. It's the business that's the principal use, and it's the residence that's kind of the accessory use. We said, you know, there's other places looking at it. We'll take a look at that, and I'm doing that. So that would be a possible option within the zoning ordinance, and if there's enough support for something like that, we would do that.
Yeah, because also, too, when zoning began, 1916, 1920s, and so forth, one of the principles was that, the zoning area with the least nuisance would be residential, and then you would continue up with different areas, and then industrial, of course, would be a real nuisance. At that time, they were saying, well, hey, you've got a house, and if you want to go ahead and put it into a nuisance area, go right ahead. It's up to you. But the reverse, of course, would not work, putting industrial in residential. I mean, to me, that seems like a reasonable thing to let people do that. If they want to have a home in an industrial area, let them go ahead and have a home in the industrial area.
Yeah. Well, what we typically do in that case is just zone that area residential, even though it might have a very close proximity to industrial. And we're doing that in some degree, and what we're doing in the changes to the zoning map. There were some places I noticed that I think they're zoned industrial, and they're non-conforming right now because they're not as a listed use, but we're just rezoning that land to residential because we've changed the rules for spot zoning. That has really nothing to do with, a spot really has nothing to do with what a spot zoning is. It's making sure that you follow your standards and have some sort of transitions to the single family, and that could be as easy as a buffer yard. Especially now you're really looking at the kind of industrial that we have in some cases might be like an office park or real light industrial. And as long as you do a decent buffer yard, you might be able to make it work. So, yeah, agreed.
Yeah. I guess I would just say, just let the person with the house decide how they want to do it in the industrial area. Who cares about a buffer? If they want to have a buffer, let them go ahead and have a buffer. But it just simplifies things so much easier.
Well, what we do in the case, because a lot of people do want the buffer, we would make the business create the buffer, the higher, more intensive use. That would be where the buffer yard would come in. Because in some cases, you're not going to know which one it is. You're not going to know who the person that wants the transition and who doesn't want the transition. And that's the real concern that we end up hearing is if we all of a sudden just put a single-family house in industrial and it's allowed, there could be a developer that could just create it and say, yeah, it's single-family, it's zoned single-family, and you find out later it's not. That would be, I think, our concern. And that's what's happening.
Who cares, I guess? You're talking about industrial.
Who ends up caring, and what we end up hearing from is the people that end up living in the homes because they didn't know it.
They didn't know they were in industrial, huh?
In some cases, they wouldn't.
Okay.
Or I can see a situation where that person who was living in that then moves out and no one cares about the house anymore, and then we've got a problem with rats and a beaten down house, and the city's got a problem eventually. So there are situations that way too. So I have a couple. Councilor Anderson.
Sam, as we were talking about this and you were making the presentation, a question did come to mind, and that how is this going to work with our older neighborhoods that are already clearly defined in zoning, and How are we going to do them? Are we going to leave those alone? Are we going to look at rezoning some of those areas? How will this work in the older neighborhoods, especially corner lots? Something that has come up quite a few times.
Well, one of the problems you have in some cases in the core area, especially in residential lots, you had the really a lot smaller lots. Our current RS type of single-family district, suburban style zoning, really set the setbacks such and the lot sizes that you can't even make it work. So we knew that. So one of the things that's in the new ordinance is what we call an RT1 designation. We're right now trying to determine where we should start with those. And we've looked at, I'm looking at about 5 different neighborhoods. One would be like Pettigrew, Whittier, the real core neighborhoods. So the RT1 designation would allow for a lot smaller lots to be built on if you can make it work within the setbacks, and the setbacks are less. The front yard setback's less. The side yard's about the same, but it's only 5 feet. And there might be even some ability to look at that a little bit too. So,
are we going to hit that? And that's what I really want to see out of this, as far as this subject, is to have some flexibility in whether it's a corner lot or just an older lot, to have some flexibility with those setbacks instead of just saying, this is what our zoning is. This is today's zoning and you have to follow it. I would rather see some flexibility in there, work with those, especially the existing homes, nothing new built in, but those existing homes that are really seeing the problems that some of our new zoning has created.
yeah, you know, another thing we're trying to clarify a little bit too within the zoning ordinance is that you'll have existing lots. Sometimes the setbacks will be less than the standard, which is 25 feet. So what we're saying is that if everybody is like that in the neighborhood, that they could still build to that standard if it was 20 or less. And so that kind of flexibility is being built into really just about anywhere, depending on how it's been currently developed.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Couple of things that I mentioned. I like that idea of kind of grandfathering some places where it makes some sense. You mentioned this chart. You know, you gave that. Could you go back to that place where it says then go to a chart? Then it goes to a chart.
I'm going to just pull up the chart here.
Oh. Yeah, clear as mud. No, clear as mud to you.
Yeah. The same chart that's in the back, really this is where you start with the zoning districts.
Right.
And then you can start to see, okay, what are some of the forms? We have in this chart what the primary forms are versus some of the secondary forms, but all of them are still available just the same. But one of the nice things you can do with this, and you can do this on the internet if you go there, it's one of the listed, it's a zoning district forms interface. So going to
No, that's what I wanted to do was say that the thing, and that's okay. I understand. I'm okay with this. I like what's happening here. What I wanted to make sure was that when you look at the chart, when you go from there to the chart, that the chart also takes into consideration then architectural standards and things like that, so that you don't just say, okay, you go from here to here, but the architectural standards, you can build a cathedral in the middle of, two little whatevers.
Well, that goes into the forms, and that's
okay. Then it goes into forms.
Yeah, and I'll
okay.
go into one just real quickly here, just to give you a sense of what you're looking at. But we don't get too deep into architectural standards, but we do get into what generally that form is going to be like. So, just if I can click into one.
Yep.
So this clicks. You can click right into one of the forms that's available in that district, and this gives you an idea
Okay.
what generally you're looking at. And the nice thing about this, let me zoom in a little bit. Is that it gives, regardless what district it's in, these are going to have the same standards. And you can see this gives you a snapshot of what the standards are
Sure.
for that form within whatever district it happens to be in. So whether or not it's the bulk regulations, which are the front yards, the side yards, the signage, the parking, the landscaping, what districts it's allowed in, what uses are allowed for that, it's all right here. What we're planning to do then is anything that's in red, you would hyperlink into the ordinance. So what we're trying to do is find a way to interface people into the ordinance and right into the ordinance. So, yeah.
So it's probably not going to look at that, and you're not going to say somebody's going to come in there and build a 3-story house on that lot, maybe.
Well, they're going to have to meet the setbacks is what it would really have to. They could do a 3-story. There's no, well, they'd have to, it's the height, 35 feet.
Yeah.
Yeah, so probably not, probably not that
That
big.
kind of thing is what
Yeah,
I'm,
right. You wouldn't have a monster house, yeah, because of the height restriction.
okay. Any other questions? I too congratulate you, and guys, you still got a lot of work to do. I mean, there's still a lot of things going on. There's going to be a lot of bumps in the road and a lot of hills you still got to climb over and plow through, but and maybe a few tunnels to dig. But there's going to be some things there. But you've got you're over the big hump, maybe a good way to put it, and you're kind of on the downslide. So keep going. It's going to be good when it gets done.
I do have one other question, just kind of for the committee.
Okay,
At what
guys?
point do you want us to continue to come back to the committee? Do you want us to go to full informational at some point? I'm just looking for feedback from you. How would you like us to proceed from here?
Could you go back to that schedule, the first one of the first slides you put up? You're kind of thinking of maybe going to city council, the informational next time in November.
That would be a possibility, although, like I mentioned, we need to make sure that you feel comfortable that adequate opportunity, and that could be continuing at city council too, but
Well,
it just
I
depends
know
where you
that
want
there
to
are
go.
some changes that are going to come with the signage thing, some fairly significant changes and things. What's your guys' feeling?
I think this could actually go to the informational, this section, and if it's still not complete at that time, it could be placed back to committee.
I guess that's true too. Oh.
That way we give a larger forum an opportunity to see this presentation.
It's going to be a big bite, and it'll be informational. That'll take that'll be a big time slot. So, Council Chair Erpenbach, would that be okay?
Michelle Erpenbach, City Council. Yes, Councilor Rolfing, what we would do is ask clerks to schedule that, and then to close out that meeting, they have a way of physically just shutting down the meeting, so that's the only topic that we would discuss that day. So if you just take it as chair of this committee and ask that it be calendared in that way, that will be
Okay.
fine.
Okay. For next meeting then?
No, not for next meeting. It would be for an opening, because we are booked pretty solid for several weeks in advance.
So they were looking at
looking at it
next
right now.
meeting and in November, so
November would be about the time we'd be ready.
sometime
Are
in
you
November.
looking at the calendar, though, Denise? Are you
Not next
looking at
meeting,
our,
I guess
no, we need to
sometime
look
in
at the
November.
official calendar on SIRE, and
Okay,
so
we'll
if you
look
can
at it
have
sometime
staff
in
connect that way, that would be awesome. Thank you.
Yep. Yes, Councilor Karski.
For information, I know that we were looking at a fiscal committee presentation, and I think Mr. Cooper could probably vouch for this. November 20th was our first opening for that. Yeah.
So this may end up being in December, whether we like it or not,
Yeah,
just
and then
because of the
if that's what
busyness,
works,
but
that's what works.
that's the
We'll
way.
look at that, yeah, we'll work.
So we'll look at it then, if the committee is, I don't know that we need to, well, maybe we should vote on it, if somebody'd like to make a motion to pass this on to the council for an informational meeting report.
So move, Anderson.
Second, Karski.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. And I would ask the clerks to schedule this as soon as possible for the informational at working with the council chair Erpenbach. Thank you. Okay, open discussion. Do we have any other open discussion for the committee? Hearing none, then I will call this meeting adjourned.